Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast. I'm your host, Mike Green from Dr. Demographics. Today, we're going to throw it back to one of the most memorable Super Bowls in history, one that was near and dear to my heart, not necessarily in a good way, the 2015 clash between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. And here we are in the 2025 season, and we're doing it again. And so we're all watching real closely. That game was an absolute nail-biter with drama, strategy, and at the controversial call by the coaches at the very end. But here in this podcast, we're not just reliving football glory. We're using it as inspiration to compare two powerhouse regions. The Pacific Northwest, home of the Seahawks, versus New England, which is, of course, the Patriots' turf. Specifically, we're going to pit Washington and Oregon against Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, and see which is the better spot for practice owners to open a practice in 2026. Now, if you don't remember in that Super Bowl, Pete Carroll called what was actually Darrell Bevell, I think is his name, the offensive coordinator coach, called that pass to that was intercepted. Anyways, before we get started, we want to thank you for supporting the podcast. Over 10 years now and over 300 episodes, it's been an incredible journey helping professionals just like you find the ideal practice and locations to thrive. And for those of you in the dental world, if you haven't checked out my book yet, Dental Marketing Mastery, it's available on both softcover and Kindle versions on Amazon. Just type in Dental Marketing Mastery, or you can put in my name or Dr. Demographics, and you'll find that book and some books by Scott McDonald as well. We've received a ton of great feedback, and I know it'll help you actually put into play the marketing efforts that you're getting from all the data that you're pulling from the Dr. Demographics reports. All right, let's dive into today's topic. Opening or expanding a practice is like prepping for the Super Bowl. You need the right strategy, you need the best team, and you need a field for advantage. And in this case, location is that field. That's what we're going to talk about. The Pacific Northwest and New England both have really strong economies right now, beautiful landscapes, dedicated populations, but they differ in a few ways that could make or break your practice's success in the long term. We'll break it down into a couple of different data-driven insights from population growth, economic factors, practice owner saturation, which is actually a pretty big difference between the two. We'll look at some competition numbers. We'll look at patient demand and a few other things. And by the end, we'll have a pretty good idea which region I think edges out for the win. Now, just up front, I am a Seahawks fan from the early 80s. Steve Largent was my man. And so I'm going to be a little biased, but I've tried to keep my biases at bay and just put it on the data. All right, let's look at the comparisons. As a practice owner, you're not just treating patients, you're actually running a business. So factors like population influx, income levels, insurance coverage, competition directly impact your patient volume, your revenue, and your work-life balance. In 2026, just as an example, and we're going to use dentists as kind of our primary example, but this works for any field. The dental market projected that was going to reach about $104 billion, according to some verified market report data that we just recently got. So choosing the right region is essential. As a matter of fact, the ADA, their latest workforce report shows that there's over 200,000 practice owners nationwide, but the distribution is actually really uneven. So urban areas oftentimes are very saturated, while growing regions offer some incredible opportunities, especially post-COVID. So think of the Seahawks and the Patriots. The Seahawks represent a really dynamic, tech-fueled Pacific Northwest, innovative, growing fast, young, active fan base. The Patriots embody that New England discipline, the established legacy, high education, affluent communities, but perhaps a little bit more crowded and a little bit more traditional. Of course, with Tom Brady all those years, they've created a great tradition in New England. So let's see how they stack up in the field of dentistry. So let's start with population growth. A key driver for new patients in the Pacific Northwest is that booming economy. According to the U.S. Census projections for 2026, Washington State's population is expected to grow by about 1.2% annually, reaching over 8 million people driven by that tech migration to Seattle and to the affordable suburbs in Oregon. Now, those are not Austin, Texas numbers. Those are not Phoenix, Arizona numbers, but they are great numbers for the Pacific Northwest. Oregon itself is projected to be adding about 0.8% yearly, hitting about 4.3 million from Californians seeking to find lower costs and increase their outdoor lifestyle for their home life. This growth means that families, young professionals, retirees needing to find that great dental care, they're looking for both pediatric, cosmetic, and geriatric services in the Pacific Northwest. Now, let's contrast that with New England. So the region is very, very stable, but it is a bit slower growing. So census data gives us that Massachusetts is at about 0.4% annual growth to about 7 million by the end of 2026. Connecticut's at about 0.2% to 3.6 million. And smaller states like Vermont, Maine, even they're kind of flattened at about 0.5%. Rhode Island, New Hampshire might see a little bit of uptick in some remote workers, but overall, New England's population is aging faster than it's expanding. So this could mean steady, but not explosive patient growth. So we're going to give the advantage to the Seahawks on this one. It's just fast growing. There's a few more opportunities with the economy, with the population growth rather, in the Pacific Northwest. So let's talk specifically about the economy. Because your patients are going to need great disposable incomes for elective procedures like teeth whitening or dental implants or those type of things. So let's start with the Pacific Northwest. It definitely shines with tech giants, Amazon, Microsoft, fueling a really high median income. So in Washington, the median household income is projected at about $95,000 by the end of 2026. With Seattle specifically topping at about 120,000. Now, Oregon is about 85,000, and that's boosted by Portland's creative economy, artistic economy. Unemployment's pretty low at about 3.5 to 4%, and job growth in the tech and healthcare arena specifically is about 2.3% annually in that area. So this translates to patients who can afford premium services and have great insurance coverages. About 92% are insured in both states per KFF data. New England has a strong fundamentals too, though. With high education levels, that leads to really solid income. So Massachusetts, Massachusetts boasts a median about 105,000. Connecticut's about 98,000, and even Maine's at about 70. But economic growth in the area is generally lower, about 1 to 1.5 GDP. Compared to Pacific Northwest, which is about 2.5. So New England obviously has great education, tourism, certainly stable, but also can be a little bit more vulnerable because of recessions. Insurance coverage, though, is high, 95% in Massachusetts and Connecticut, but that higher living costs sometimes can squeeze that elective spending. It's like the Patriots defense, super reliable, but not necessarily really flashy. So we're going to give the slight edge to the Seahawks there again, just because of that growth momentum. Now let's talk something that I know a lot of you have questions about that you ask me, and let's talk about practice owner saturation and competition. And this is really where the rubber hits the road. The ADA in 2024 data shows that New England has a higher practice owner to population ratio. Massachusetts is about 78.2 per 100,000. Connecticut 68.7, New Hampshire 62.4, Rhode Island is lower at about 50.6. But overall, New England is a little bit more saturated, specifically in urban hubs like Boston. From 2014 to 2024, many New England states saw a decrease in ratios, Connecticut about down 9.2%. But the projections in 2024 show some stabilization and a few potential shortages in rural Maine and Vermont, which equals opportunity. So the HRSA data indicates fewer dental deserts, if you can imagine with me, that there's about 42 shortage areas in Massachusetts, meaning that there's a little bit more competition with that ratio. So let's flip over to the other side of the country, Pacific Northwest. Ratios are balanced, but there's a little bit more room to grow. So Washington has about 70 per 100,000, Oregon 65 to 70. And that's a change from the last 10 years by about 1.4%. So again, what that's telling us is the population growth is outpacing the professional growth. Showed the shortages say Oregon has about 133 areas. Washington's not the top, but it does have some rural gaps that create that. And so New England ranks at about number 4, Connecticut number 5 for those dental deserts, but saturation is really in those metros. So for 2026, Pacific Northwest offers a more untapped market, especially outside of Seattle. It's a little bit less crowded outside of Seattle. That Pacific Northwest, it's young, health conscious. They drive demand for that preventative and cosmetic care. And so it creates that opportunity in those sectors. So in those areas, there's about 75% of offices are reporting pretty full schedules. With tech worker resolutions for better health, January surges in whitening and orthodontics. We see that every year, super common. Insurance utilization is strong, but out-of-pocket spending is rising with those higher incomes. And so that can often help in areas like New England. New England's very proactive patients too. High dental visit rates, absolutely. One of the highest in the country, as a matter of fact. But aging populations mean more focus on restoratives and geriatrics. So busyness is stable, but in Q4 of 2025, the ADA data shows a little bit of concerns about the insurance reimbursements and staffing in the New England area. So demand is heavy, don't get me wrong, but it's not quite as dynamic as the Pacific Northwest as far as growth-driven influx that we're seeing for practices in that area. So here's the challenges. Both regions face staffing shortages. Hygienists, dental hygienists are hard to recruit everywhere in the country, but certainly in those areas as well. Overhead costs are high in both. And frankly, New England has the edge there probably because the Pacific Northwest has some other challenges with the high-tech space and the income disparity that's there. Pacific Northwest has earthquakes. New England has hurricanes. But as far as natural disasters, we've talked about that on a previous episode. You just need to be prepared and you can weather that storm. So let's wrap up the comparison. Population growth favors Pacific Northwest, economy slightly. Pacific Northwest saturation is less intense in the Pacific Northwest. Demand is vibrant, so both areas are expanding, but I think the verdict is my Seattle Seahawks. I think if I was going to compare the two, I think that they will edge out the Patriots, not only in the Super Bowl that's coming up here in 2 weeks, but also I think they'll edge them out in as far as if I had to pick between one of those two areas, I probably would be looking at the Pacific Northwest. They're both fantastic, just like both the Patriots and Seahawks are great teams, but I think the Pacific Northwest wins out here. Now, that's just me, and yes, I may be a little biased. I've been a Seahawk fan my whole life, but I do look at data, right? That's what we do for a living, and so we help doctors like you make those good decisions. So no matter where you choose, always start with the demographics. Analyze the local trends. Look at least 6 months before you launch. Use tools like our reports at Dr. Demographics, a best sites report if you don't have a site identified, a site viability if you do have a site identified. And one thing I'll put a shout out to is specialty matters. So things could change dramatically if you're an orthodontist compared to a pediatric dentist or a prosthodontist to a veterinary office. Things can change dramatically. So that's why that data is so important. At Dr. Demographics, we specialize in helping you understand the analysis of the data. We don't just give you the data, we help you understand it so you can know exactly how to put it into play. And you can find out all that information on our website at drdemographics.com. So I hope this inspired you a little bit. I hope you're excited for the Super Bowl. If you're a football person, if you're not, you should turn it on anyways. It'll be a great game, I think. Hopefully, if you found this helpful, feel free to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform, share it with a colleague who's maybe a Patriots fan or a Seahawks fan, might help them make a good decision. But when you're ready to own your next practice, buy your next practice, or buy your first practice, make sure you reach out to us at drdemographics.com or give me a call at 844-704-0499, and we'll see you at the Super Bowl. No, we'll see you on the next episode.